Hello and welcome to Meet the Ministers. We're very fortunate this evening to have Mr. Christopher Pyne, Federal Opposition Minister for, let's get this large title here, Shadow Minister for Education, Apprenticeships and Training, Manager of Opposition Business, House of Representatives. Welcome, Chris.
Chick, good to be here.
Chris, thanks for coming to Brisbane. It's great to see the opposition here in Brisbane. We're looking forward to the next 12 months.
It's going to be very exciting.
Well, before we start, mate, tell us about Christopher Pyne and who he is, where he comes from, his hopes and ambitions.
That's pretty broad. Well, I got elected to Parliament when I was 25 years old, so that was 19 years ago. So I was very young. I was the Wyatt Roy of my generation.
Yeah.
And, of course, he was 20, so he's kind of broken the record there. The previous record was 21. A guy from Adelaide called... what was his name? It's completely escaped me. Nice bloke though, but it was 1966 to 69, and I've been in Parliament all that time. I'm now, when I got elected, I wasn't married. I'm now married for 18 years. I have 4 children. The twins are 11 and a half. I have a 9-year-old and a 4-year-old, 2 girls and 2 boys. I spent most of the Howard era swimming upstream like the proverbial trout. And then got appointed as a Parliamentary Secretary for Health to Tony Abbott, and then I was the Minister for Ageing in the last dying days of the Howard government. I prefer to call that the golden age of the Howard government, since I was a minister in it. And then since then I've been Shadow Minister for Education, now Manager of Opposition Business for the last 3 years, and very much looking forward to the next sitting week with the budget on Tuesday.
Mate, exciting times for the federal opposition. There's a lot of things to achieve. I've read your press releases recently regarding future funding on education for university, etc. Can you fill us in what the coalition plans to do?
Well, as you know, the government's left us with virtually no money at all. So we've got big problems in terms of what to promise for the next election. And my view is the next election will be won and lost by the party that's showing the most economic fiscal rectitude. Yeah. And I don't think it's a time for big spending promises that the public will think, well, they're never going to be able to do that, because the public aren't stupid and they know that the Labor Party has spent all the money that they were left by the Howard government, and they are taxing everybody more. They've either introduced or increased 20 taxes in the last 4.5 years. The biggest, the daddy of them all is the carbon tax coming up in July. And in education, we will have to focus on what we can do that is not costly. And the things that we can do are teacher quality, principal autonomy, so that principals in government schools have a lot more decision-making power of their own, and a robust curriculum. None of those are big-ticket spending items, but all of them are things that we can do that would be dramatically important for school education. And in universities, universities' biggest problem is revenue. The government has hurt their revenue by abolishing domestic fee-paying students. We will bring them back. And they've also hurt their revenue very stupidly by hurting the overseas foreign student market. They've cut that by $4 billion in the last 4 years, which has been, it wasn't our money, it wasn't taxpayers' money, that $4 billion. That was new revenue to universities. Yeah. So we need to repair the damage that the government's done to the foreign student market and give universities the opportunity to grow their own revenue.
Chris, I'm just interested to hear you say we're not going to promise unnecessary promise, which is refreshing to hear, because most politicians seem to raise it on a platform of promising so much and delivering so little. Is this going to be a future for the Liberal Party to say, OK, we're not going to promise a lot, but what we're going to do is very basic? Or how are you going to approach that?
Well, the traditional method of getting elected in this country is to make a lot of promises and then after the election say, unfortunately, we can't afford them now.
Yeah.
And I think the public are kind of onto politicians.
A little bit.
And I think Julia Gillard's kind of smashed the mould by promising there'll be no carbon tax under a government I lead, and then introducing one, or promising to introduce one a few weeks after the election. I mean, that kind of took the cake. And when she compared that to John Howard and the GST, of course, that was a base lie, because John Howard did go to an election in '96 saying there'd be no GST. And then when he changed his mind, he said, but I'll have an election and let you guys decide. So in '98 we had an election. on the GST, which we won. So she did nothing like what John Howard promised, what John Howard did, and yet she still thinks she can get away with those things. So, I think the next election, the public are going to be very wary of promises that politicians make that don't appear to be hard and fast and clear and costed. So in education, we won't make any promises that we can't fund. If we have got new spending proposals, there'll be spending savings being made. The two things the Abbott government will have to do in terms of the budget is increase revenue, not by increasing taxes, but by increasing growth in the economy, so that companies are making more profits and individuals are being paid better wages. And if you do those things, then more money flows to the budget, to the government. That's what happened under the Costello-Howard era, of course. And the second thing we'll do is that we'll have to live within our means. So I think there is an appetite in the public for the government to live within its means. They don't want to think that we can spend money that they haven't got. You go to the Royal Show, you take $100, you think you're going to spend that. Once the $100 is gone, it's gone.
It's all over.
So governments have to behave like we have to behave. And it's gone are the days when you can sort of just go and borrow more money.
Interested to hear that you've got a happy family and 4 kids, 4 healthy kids. Obviously, education is going to be a big thing in your life.
Sure.
Especially on a parliamentary...
Very expensive.
Yeah, well, especially on parliamentary wages. I wouldn't say it's that flash, really, considering the work you guys do.
It's better, though. It's better than it was.
Yeah, well, it's a good thing. But obviously, I did read a while ago about private school education. It looks like the current government may be cutting some funds or funding to private schools, where I've always thought private schools are a help to the economy by parents virtually funding education for virtual free.
Sure.
Is this something that you guys are going to restore, or what are you going to do with the private school?
Well, the government doesn't support non-government schooling in the way that the coalition does. But if you are in a non-government school, you essentially attract about $7,500 of government funds, both state and federal. And if you are in a government school, you get about $14,000 from funds, government, state and federal. So at the moment, you could say that people with their children in non-government schools are subsidising the cost of education by about 50%, and that if they weren't in the non-government school, if they were all in the government school, we'd have to find that $7,000 per student.
Now, Chris, I'm just going to come back. I want us to wrap up to go to a commercial break because I want to keep on going here, so
no trouble.
Forgive me for a moment.
Okay.
We'll be back very shortly after this. Thanks very much. Okay, welcome back. We're very pleased to have Christopher Pyne with us. Chris, when we left before, we were talking about private school education and funding it. Can you tell us what's happening with the opposition's plans for that?
Well, our big concern with the government's current position on the Gonski review is that they will rob Peter to pay Paul. They don't have the $113 billion that the Gonski review has as its price tag. They haven't got that money. The states and the Commonwealth between them, they obviously haven't got it. And trying to plan the future of education funding around $113 billion is like planning our family budgets around winning Powerball on Thursday night. That's obviously not going to happen. So therefore, what does the government do next? And my concern is they'll pick bits out of the Gonski review, like means testing the income of parents of children at non-government schools, introducing a minimum payment that every parent needs to pay regardless of the school in the non-government school, and also changing the indexation arrangements that currently apply to non-government schools. If non-government schools lose any funds at all over the next 4 years, there's only one way they can find that money, and that is to put up school fees. And given that the cost of living pressures at the moment are really acute, the last thing that families can afford is to have the situation where the school fees are going up. And we support government schools, but we also support non-government schools. And if the 30 to 40% of children that are in non-government schools walked around the corner and joined a government school, the budget would be broken.
It's a hard one, but obviously the government's trying to find savings in the budget, which is going to struggle with lack of receipts coming in. So this is going to be implemented pretty soon, I presume.
Well, the government has to legislate for the new funding model by the end of this year. And they are so far behind, it's very hard to imagine what they could do. Now, they've announced, since the Gonski review came out, that there's another implementation study, another working group. As usual, they're incapable of making a decision, and the uncertainty that's being created in the school community is really unacceptable.
Yeah, if there's not enough bad things going in the world, just lack of confidence. But I want to talk about change a little bit, Chris. You're a very well-dressed man.
No, I'm not.
Folks, you might, before we came on here, this man actually looks so immaculate, it would put us all to shame.
I covered myself in powder.
Yeah, but he's a great operator, folks, and it's very pleasurable to have him in the studio. It's been a great pleasure so far. It's a lot of fun. But when you see a man who's so well dressed, talking about Australian kids who are fashion designers and the need to train our next generation of fashion designers, film crew, kids, people in media, it means the coalition is going to get behind the arts and look at funding where we can so we keep these young people coming through the training system.
Yeah, well, the coalition's always been better for the arts, ironically, than the Labor Party. I mean, there's this myth in the arts community that somehow Labor is good for the arts community. But the truth is that it was the coalition that did things like establish the Australia Council. It was the Gorton government that established the Australia Council. It was the Fraser government that established SBS. It was the Fraser government that established the Australian Film and Television School. The coalition governments have, I guess, maybe because of the myth that we keep trying to sort of break, we've always been more generous financially to the arts community than the Labor Party. But maybe amongst artists there's a predilection to support Labor, and so they assume Labor is better for them, but they're not. And so we will do all the things that we've always done to support the arts community, because a vibrant arts community is indicative of a vibrant, robust, youthful, exciting society, and without them it'd be a sad community. I'm not very good at those things myself, so I've never been strong on poetry or acting or anything else, but
acting,
some people say show politics is show business for ugly people. So, I think there's a lot to be said for that. A lot to be said.
I wouldn't say you're an ugly man, Chris. Very well dressed.
For that.
You're a gentleman.
That saying.
But it is good to know that there are policies in place for young people that is there a career in media and arts. I mean, for me, it is the highest point of society that people can express themselves in the arts, and it'd be just disappointing to know that there was going to be problems with funding in the future, because many kids are involved in that in Australia.
Well, the media and the arts, of course, are very attractive courses for young people at universities. So the courses that attract young people are the courses that will be funded, and I don't think there's any suggestion that the media and the arts will be losing their attraction. I mean, sometimes there's different problems with particular colleges of arts. I think in Melbourne, a few years ago, there was doubt about the Melbourne College of Arts, which was a highly regarded one. My understanding is the Kennett government, again a coalition government, stepped in and provided the funds to keep the doors open, and now they're flourishing as part of Melbourne University. So, you know, we have a strong support for the media and for the arts, and I'm here on community television putting my money where my mouth is, I suppose. Well,
that's a great thing, folks, that we do have a federal minister here supporting community TV, and he has already expressed his view and knowledge of community TV. So that is terrific, Chris. You already knew about what's going on, so you obviously are all over these things and the difficulties that a lot of places and people have with funding community TV. So hopefully it's in your budget.
Well, we need lots of different voices in the media, and community television is an important voice.
Just on to something a bit more topical. We have a lot of foreign doctors coming into this country, obviously doing a very good job, and they're very much part of our society, but there are limited places for young people in Australia to try and get into medicine or special courses. Can you suggest possible ways that your government, when it's elected, is going to help overcome that type of thing?
Well, medicine is the most expensive course at university, so it's limited by the amount of money that the universities have to put into medicine. And with the abolition of Australian domestic fee-paying students, and of course the reduction in revenue from foreign students, it's even harder for universities to expand their numbers of students in medicine. So in the Howard government, we had special provisions for medical schools in order to try and encourage enrolment of new doctors, which of course leads to new GPs and then new specialists, Australian born and raised, or of course new citizens who are Australians. Without the revenue, the universities can't provide the medical courses. So the way to get more students in medicine is to get more revenue into universities, and the way to get more revenue in universities is to free up the university system. so that universities can find their own ways of increasing their revenue, because the Commonwealth has not got a money tree, and obviously we will provide as much as we can. But Labor's gone in the opposite direction. They put more regulation on universities, which is costly. They've abolished the domestic fee-paying students, and they've hurt the foreign students' revenue. We're going to try and reverse all of those changes.
I was pleased to note Arthur Sinodinos is leading a deregulation task force. Which
He's a good man, Arthur.
Yeah, terrific initiative to say, like, how we're going to... And I know they came up here with Teresa Gambara and held some forums in Brisbane asking the business leaders to get involved in how we cut red tape. How important is red tape cutting to get this country going again?
Well, I mean, I was down on the Gold Coast today, and I went to Bond University and met a whole lot of school principals as well. And, you know, one of the hottest topics of the day was regulation. And the Bond University Deputy Vice-Chancellor told me that there are 50 different reports that the Bond University has to do for the government every year. So basically one a week that they have to do about every possible aspect of universities. Now, that is crazy.
Yeah.
And it's very hard to, you know, expand and to grow and to put your resources into things that grow your revenue and grow your university if you've got to have all these regulatory controls over the system. Now, the government's introduced a new body called TEQSA, the Tertiary Education Quality Standards Australia, I think it's called, and that is supposed to have reduced regulation by getting rid of the state bureaucracies and replacing them with one national bureaucracy. But it hasn't. I mean, I'm hearing stories about how TEQSA turns up to University of New South Wales and says, your MBA needs to be 18 months. And they said, but we've been doing this MBA for 30 years, and it's apparently the 37th best course in the world.
Right.
And they're told, you need to make it 18 months. And they said, but we've been doing it for 12 months for 30 years. And they said, well, we're from TEQSA, and this is what you have to do. Now, that is exactly the wrong
stuff,
thing.
Isn't it?
And the market will determine whether people put value on that course, because if they don't, they won't go to it anymore.
All right, we're just going to have a quick break, come back to this great discussion. Back in a moment, folks. Thank you. Okay, we're back with Christopher Pyne. Christopher, next week Parliament sits again. Tell us what's in store for next week.
What's in store? I wish I knew. The government's budget is to be handed down on Tuesday. No one's really talking about the budget because they've had such a torrid time since the Parliament last rose. I mean, just when you think this government can't get any worse, something terrible happens. And you know, they've had the disastrous Craig Thompson scandal, which the Prime Minister last week tried to tourniquet by pushing him out of the caucus, but you know, it's 3 years too late. He's already very much associated with everything that's wrong with this government. And yesterday, of course, the HSU headquarters in Sydney were raided, and it appears that it's alleged that one officer of the HSU was hiding in the car park with a suitcase full of documents. I mean, it's really amateur hour stuff. And, of course, the Speaker has now been confirmed that the AFP are going to fully investigate the charges that have been levelled at him about the use of his cab charge documents. So that is another blow to the government. It just adds to the whole sense of chaos and shambles around the federal government. And the opposition doesn't get any great joy out of any of this because the country... Not even
a little bit? Just a teeny bit?
I think a while ago I might have got some joy out of it,
right.
But confidence is so low.
Yeah.
And people are so unsure about what to do and not spending any money, not buying houses, that it's really affecting the country. And the first job of any government is to do no harm, you know. And when the government has become a major factor in your investment decisions, in your household spending decisions, in whether you put your children in a non-government school, then the government is really so rancid that the public need to do something about it. So next week I think will be a torrid week. We'll obviously, you know, try and hold the government to account as well as we have over the last 18 months. But I think there is an appetite for an election in Australia to give the public a government with a mandate in the lower house, and I think it's time that the crossbench members, Tony Windsor, Robert Oakeshott, Andrew Wilkie pull the pin on this government.
Okay, let's say we go fast forward 12 months. You guys have got the upper and lower house sewn up nicely. What are the first couple of things you reckon you'd do straight away?
First thing the new government will do if we're elected is abolish the carbon tax, and that might take 3 months because the Labor Party might be foolish enough to block that in the Senate if they have the numbers, and then we'll have to wait another 3 months to give them another opportunity to vote for it. And I think they will see the sense of voting it out, given that we'll have hopefully just won an election and therefore have a mandate to remove the carbon tax. I mean, nobody could be under any doubt that the next election is going to be a referendum on the carbon tax. And if the public decide to elect an Abbott government, it would be a very brave Labor Party that then said, no, we're not going to pay any attention to that result. So I think in a matter of months the carbon tax will be abolished. That's our first item of business. I think we have to go through the books and work out exactly how bad the situation is and try and get some stable government back in Canberra so that there isn't a monthly or a weekly or a daily scandal that the media can sink their teeth into. We need conservative, stable, sensible government.
It's certainly a lot of challenges in front of you, Chris. There has been probably a lot of loss of confidence in politicians over the last several years. Mostly self-inflicted. So how are you going to fix that image up? What does the government do to fix it up? I think what
politicians have to do is promise what they can promise and deliver, rather than just promise things they know they'll never be able to deliver. I think they have to try and be honest with the public before the election and afterwards, and I think the people appreciate straight answers and straight talking from politicians. If we can't do something, we should simply say so. And I think the public are thoroughly sick of hearing what they want to hear rather than being told what is the truth about a situation. And that's why in education, I won't be promising things that I can't deliver. And I think that will get a welcome reception from the public, and that will restore people's faith in the government.
Yeah. I think you guys are going to have a massive task in front of you if you get there. It's never easy. It seems to be a never-ending cycle for the coalition to come in and try and straighten things up. Clean up the mess. Yeah, it is never going to end.
I wish I had $1 for everybody who'd said to me, Labor spends the money, you guys have to get into government and balance the books again, and then Labor wins and they spend the money. But, that's basically been the cycle of Australian politics.
Yeah, well, it's been very nice of you coming in, Chris.
That's a pleasure, thank you.
We wish you all the best and wish your family all the best. You must have a very patient wife to allow you to do so much politics.
She's a saint, there's no doubt about that.
She must be a saint.
She's a saint.
Well, she must be a very lovely lady. You must have a very lucky man to have such a lovely family. So congratulations, Chris, and thank you very much for coming on the show.
That's a pleasure. Thanks very much. Good to see you.